Welcome, everyone. I'm Lori Howard, CASA's Program Specialist Coordinator, and I'm here to talk with you today about California EL Civics Basics, civic participation and IELCE requirements for those of you who are WIOA 2 agencies, and best COAP practices for CAEP agencies who want to start using the civic participation and IELCE system, or the COAP system. We have 90 minutes together today. I have some question periods set up to save for questions, and then I'd be happy to stay on after the session to answer any personal questions that you might have. I welcome you. This is really for new participants or who haven't done civic participation or IELCE before, or someone who needs a refresher, or for those CAEP agencies who haven't yet worked with the COAP system or who are new to the COAP system. So if you are one of my longtime attendees at EL Civics network meetings, etc., you don't really need to be here, but I will be recording this session and you can look at it anytime online. But if you are here, welcome, and I'm thrilled to have you. Please put your name and school in the chat so I can keep track of your attendance. I would appreciate that. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand and hopefully I'll see that. Okay, our goals and objectives for today. At the end of this session, participants will be able to identify the requirements of the California WIOA Title II AFLA EL Civics grant, specific to civic participation and IELCE. We're going to talk about all those acronyms in a moment, so don't worry yet. And also for the CAEP agency people, identify the best practices for CAEP agency use of the California COAP system. Would you raise your hand if you're an CAEP only agency, just so I can see who you might be? Okay. Great, Victoria. Glad to have you here. Anybody else? Okay, so hopefully this will be useful to you. And again, I'd be happy to stay on the line a little bit afterwards if you need some individual help. Okay, so just on a piece of scrap paper, if you would, just characterize your understanding of either California civic participation and IELCE or best practices for CAEP agency use of the California COAP system. Would you just on a piece of paper, just rate yourself from 1 to 5. Number 1, if you don't know much, or number 5, if you're an expert. And again, if you're an expert, you don't need to be here, but rate yourself, and hopefully we'll see some growth in that as the 90 minutes goes on. Okay, so let's start with the very basics. What is California EL Civics? California EL Civics, the EL Civics stands for English Literacy and Civics Education. And that's the name that started the grant in the year 2000, and we still use that for our overall program, EL Civics. English Literacy and Civics Education. It promotes the development of integrated programs that incorporate both English language and literacy instruction, which in general is ESL, and then civics education that we call citizenship preparation. We're not going to talk about citizenship preparation today. There are some trainings on that, but the citizenship preparation is part of the EL Civics grant, as is civic participation and IELCE. So originally this grant was funded in 1999. California got it in about 2000. It was called WIA at the time, I think. Yes, WIA, I can't even remember. And then in 2014, it was refunded as WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Title II. And all of that is under the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, AFLA. So you're going to be hearing AFLA, WIOA as acronyms, and so it'd be good to get used to them. So WIOA 2, this grant that we have from the Adult Education Office of the National Department of Education, defines English literacy and civics education as English services which enable competency in English language and also advanced skills needed to function effectively as parents, workers, and citizens of the United States. So that's why we call it, just in a sense, regular ESL, because it encompasses all the things we would want to teach an English non-native speaker of English. It also includes instruction in literacy and language acquisition, the rights and responsibilities of citizenship and civic participation, and it may include workforce training. And actually, in 2014, workforce training was mandated as part of the funding and is called IELCE in California. And it has a special number, which I'm going to talk to you about. So here are the numbers. So again, EL Civics is our umbrella over all of our instruction. One of the arms of the umbrella, or things that go under the umbrella, is citizenship preparation. It is funded by what we call 231 funds. And then we have civic participation, which is the general ESL type course, also funded by 231. And then we have IELCE, which is funded by 243 funds. And so you need to be doing workforce training in order to get payment points for these 243 funds. And we're going to talk all about it. So let's talk a little bit about CAEP and the COAP system. It's good. I know a lot of you who are WIOA are also CAEP, so it's good for you to know about the CAEP, about how CAEP relates to the COAP system as well. AB 2098 recommended that CAEP agencies, CAEP stands for California Adult Education Program Agencies, utilize the California COAP system for instruction and assessment of students to demonstrate immigrant integration indicator outcomes. And we're going to show you what those are, but we call them I3, 3 I's, immigrant integration indicator outcomes. And you'll find that in your data system that you'll be reporting some of those UCAPE agencies, and you can report them also WIOA agencies. So TOPS Pro Enterprise, our data system, which is also called TE, records I3 outcomes. It looks like 13, but it's actually I3 outcomes. And you can find more about that on the California Adult Education website that you see here at the bottom. And all of these links work and can lead you to these. I'm going to be posting this PowerPoint on the EL Civics website, as well as the recording, and it will also be posted on the EL Civics channel. So when you get these slides, you can link directly to the things I'm talking about. So CAEP agency use of COAPs. So the California legislature believes that increasing CAEP I3 outcomes to demonstrate program effectiveness can be done by using COAPs. And COAPs are the California EL Civic Civic Objectives and Additional Assessment Plans. They are the thing that drives our EL Civic system, and I'm going to tell you more about those. And that they can now be used not only with ESL students, but with ABE, ASE, and CTE students to help them complete their I3 goals. So COAPs can be used to plan instruction and assessment and to demonstrate efficacy in real-life tasks, such as completing a job application, consulting with a school counselor, or making a consumer complaint. And ABE, ASE, and CTE students can achieve the CAEP I3 outcomes by passing a COAP assessment. So those COAP assessment passages are put into our data system, TE, and then they're counted. WIOA funded agencies receive payment points for those passages. CAEP funded agencies receive outcomes, which is also important to their data. Okay, so we have a few documents that it would be good for if you're a CAEP agency to look at. One of them, it's all on the EL Civics website. Again, the link is at the bottom here. Successful implementation of COAPs for CAEP agencies. ABE, ASE, and CTE students can be placed in the appropriate COAP level using the following chart. So as you test your students, you need to know what level they are. And so you need to look at this chart to help you know what level of instruction and assessment you're giving to the students. So you can follow this chart. If your student is a beginning ABE literacy student, that means they scored 203 and below on the CASAS test, then they would be intermediate low students for our CAEP system. And you can find these documents at these links: Increasing CAEP Outcomes or Successful Implementation. There's 2 documents, and these links that lead directly to those documents can also be found by going to the IELCE Civics webpage, which is linked here.
Lori, this is Barbara. You have 2 questions. One is the PowerPoint available, and the other one, someone is having trouble finding your link. And so I tried to help her, but
okay, if they registered for the session, and you can still register now, go to caadultedtraining.org and register, and then you'll be sent an email which has the link. Barb, if you have it, if you could.
No, she's on. She just doesn't see your PowerPoint. And I tried to Maria, try clicking at the bottom.
So Barbara, can you email to her or talk to her?
I did, and she's not responding.
Okay. So I'm so sorry, the recording will be posted, but I can't deal with that now, the technical issues. It may be something from your computer. We have only 90 minutes together, and I want to post this on our website. And so this may be, you might want to ask your IT person why you can't see it. Is anybody else having trouble seeing my screen? Okay.
No,
and
it's fine.
Thank you. Okay, so the slides will be posted on the IELCE Civics webpage. You can go right to this link, or you can go. You won't have this. Let me put that link. Let me go there. See if I can go there, and let me put that link for you into the chat. Okay, and all the information, including the slides, you can find at this link. Okay, and we can go over this at the end. There was another question. Okay, do ABE, ASE, and CTE students need to be immigrants? No, they don't need to be former ESL students or non-native speakers of English. They do not. So what we found is that these CAEPs have to do with what we talked about, like getting a driver's license or doing a job application. Native speakers of English need to do that too. And so the legislature has deemed that these materials can be used for native speakers as well. But the ABE, ASE, CTE students who are also non-native speakers of English can use these materials as well, but those students don't need to be non-native speakers of English. And that's a great question. Thank you so much. As all of these, let me see. Is this applicable to people with WIOA also? TE doesn't seem to like enrollment in ESL with other WIOA programs. Jaime, I don't exactly understand your question. If you want to unmute yourself and ask, I'd be happy to help you. But it was originally designed for WIOA students, ESL WIOA students, and now can be used with all students. Did you have if that doesn't answer your question, please come on and give me your question orally so I can better understand it. Okay, so let's talk more about civic participation. We've talked about the CAEP. Let's talk about the requirements for civic participation and IELCE. So WIOA has requirements. CAEP has only suggestions for best practices. So if you're a CAEP only agency, you don't have WIOA, you can give and take what I'm going to talk about from here on. But what we would say is that if you follow these, what we're saying is requirements for WIOA, you would have the best practice of implementing the program. And if someday you want to apply for WIOA, you would be ready to apply for it, and you would have done all of the requirements and you would know how to do them. So we suggest you follow these requirements. WIOA agencies must follow these requirements that I'm going to speak about now. Okay, so again, talking a little bit more about California EL Civics. This started again in the year 2000. We got $20 million from the federal government, California did, and we decided to build on the competency-based education, or CBE, system we already had in place, to connect language instruction to the real world. So rather than basing our instruction on grammar, we would base it on competencies, which we were already doing with CBE. And then we decided, in order to distribute the funds that we were getting from the federal government, we would utilize performance-based assessment to evaluate how learners use the language and to measure their possible success in the outside world. So not just giving them the information, but asking them to utilize it or demonstrate the use of this information so that we could simulate how they might be able to do that in the outside world. And we also wanted to connect English learners to the workplace. So let me see, I have a question. So Jaime, you said so they can take a co-op without enrollment in ESL. An ABE, ASC, or CTE student can take can study a co-op without being enrolled in ESL. That is correct. They won't receive payment points. They'll receive I3 outcomes. Okay, hopefully that's clear. And again, please put your name and agency in the chat if you would. Okay, so let's talk about the California EL Civic system. I've thrown these acronyms around and these names around. I'm sorry, but had to start there before we talk about the system. So the civic participation and IELCE system, they're basically one and the same. It started out with civic participation, and IELCE was added to use the same items that we're going to talk about. It's based on a system of civic objectives. We use the letter CO to be an abbreviation for civic objectives. And those are the general competencies that help students access their community. And we have, I've forgotten now, maybe 60 of those. Then based on those civic objectives, well, and so here's an example of one. So civic objective 33 is identify and access employment and training resources to obtain and keep a job. And then each civic objective has a number of civic objectives and additional assessment plans. Those are plans that are standardized through the state. You can access them on the EL Civics website, and they give you a plan for performance-based assessment. And what you're to do with those plans is to make an assessment based on the plan that meets the needs of your students, and then offer instruction that will help students pass the assessment. So performance-based assessment is basically teaching all the information that the students would need to pass the assessment. And we'll talk more about that. So, for example, 2 tasks in a performance-based test on civic objective 33 might be complete a job application and demonstrate successful job interview techniques. So you can see the real-world application of these objectives. Okay, California Civic Participation IELCE requirements or best practices. So the thing you must do if you're WIOA, and we suggest you do to have a good program, is to develop and administer a school community student needs assessment. So we know from research that successful programs that continually assess the needs of their students, the needs, interests, and language skills of their learners, give better instruction, and that students succeed and gather the information they need. So that has become a requirement of our WIOA 2 system, and a suggestion for our CAEP agencies that you develop and administer a school community needs assessment. And then once you've done the needs assessment, you complete the needs assessment summary form. And I'm going to tell you how you can find information about doing this. One of the things you can do is read the school community needs assessment requirement document that's on the website. Again, you can link here, and you can find it at the link that I posted previously, and I'll post it again. All of the information I'm talking about today can be found at this link or this web page. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about needs assessment. There are a few different kinds of needs assessment. The first one is the general needs assessment, and we want to assess the needs of the student community as a whole. So we want to ask, what EL Civics information do students need and want to learn? We know that students persist longer if they're taught information that they want to learn. So that's why the general needs assessment is a requirement. If you are also funded for IELCE 243 funds, then you should also do a workforce training needs assessment and find out which career pathways your students want to follow or what kind of training they want to get. So that would be a workforce training needs assessment. And then optionally, after you've done the first two, you could also within the classroom say, we have chosen as a school community 6 COAPs to study. Which of these do you want to study today? So you can have a further needs assessment for a specific class. But the California School Community Needs Assessment is a general document based on your whole agency. Okay, so this is what our suggestion is for developing a school community needs assessment, that you choose 2 to 4 objectives from each of the 7 competency areas on the pre-approved civic objective list. And actually, I should have changed that to 6 because the 7th area is workplace. So if you're doing the general assessment, we would suggest that you choose from these. So our sections or our competency areas are consumer economics, community resources, health, government and law, transition, and employment. So we suggest you would select from 2 to 4 civic objectives from each of these areas. For low-level students, beginning low, you might choose 2. That would give you 12 items from them to choose from. And if you are assessing a higher level, that would be 6 times 4, perhaps 24 items at the advanced level that you might be asking your students, which ones of these do you want to study? And again, the teachers and administrators at your school can be the ones who choose the ones that they think are most applicable to their students. Okay, so here are some sample objectives. We looked at 33 already. We have Civic Objective 2, which has to do with resolving a consumer complaint. We have health, which is accessing free or low-cost medical services. 45, identify features of the legal system. Transition, research and identify and utilize soft skills. And then the workplace training, if you're doing a workplace training COAP, civic objective, then you might choose early childhood education, for example. So just some examples of our civic objectives. And then you would use the chosen civic objective to design the needs assessment. So you decide which 12 or 24 you're going to offer your students. And then beginning level learners would need a picture-based assessment tool with simplified words, and an intermediate to advanced level should also have pictures, but they can have phrases or sentences. We should not be giving our students this language, okay? This is for teachers. We want to give our students more simplified language, something like this: use a bank. So this might be appropriate for a beginning level or even an intermediate level student. Pictures of banking and then the words use a bank. Okay, we would never use this language, which is the language of the civic objective, used only by teachers. Okay, so you want to administer the needs assessment to a majority of the learners. Ask them to check their top 3 to 5, you decide. If it's 12, you could have them choose 3. If it's 24, you might have them choose 5. I would not do a ranking system. I would just have them put an X next to the one they want and then add them all up. That is the easiest way to do it. And we don't want you to spend an inordinate amount of time in this, but we do want you to find out the needs of your students. You want to tally the results and then use the results to select 3 to 10 objectives. That's the rule, either more than 3 or fewer than 10 civic objectives in our selection system, which I'll show you in a little bit. Once you've chosen the civic objectives, you want to look at all the COAPs or assessment plans that are available to you within that civic objective to see which one might best meet the needs of your students. And then you select them, make sure that you are checking out that what the content, the level, the type of assessment, if it's oral or written, if you want your students to do an oral task or written tasks. And then once you've completed the whole thing, you look up the summary form, which is again on the IELTS Civics website, and you fill it out just with a brief description of what you did. We surveyed 500 students, 300 of them wanted Civic Objective 5, 250 of them wanted Civic Objective 3, whatever it is you did. And then so you tell which ones you selected, etc. So you describe the process in a brief paragraph. And let's see if I have this here. We do have some examples of all of these things on the IELTS Civics website. Okay, so yeah, let me just go back. So you can go to, again, this website I've put in the chat and find a whole section on needs assessment. And there you'll see some examples of a needs assessment summary form and of a few different needs assessments. Any questions? Okay, so now let's talk about the workplace. So if you are an IELCE agency, how many of your agencies receive 243 funds? Why don't you raise your hand? Okay, few of you, maybe some of you don't know that. That's okay. But if your agency does receive 231 funds, 243 funds, sorry. Then you'll want to develop and administer a workforce needs assessment. And that's separate from the general one. You'll still probably have 231 funds too. So you'll want to do that for your general population. And then for those students who want to do job training, you would use this. So the first thing you need to do is survey the priority job and training needs in your area. So what kind of jobs are available in your area? We don't want to train students for jobs that they can't find the job. So we want to see what kind of jobs are available in our area. We might talk to our Workforce Development Board, our AJCC, our partners, our CTE advisory groups. We want to talk to people. And this may be done by your CTE teachers and administrators at your agency. It may have already been done, but if not, you'll want to do that and make sure the job training you're offering is something where students can get a job. Then decide which job training your agency or partner agencies can offer. So do you have the equipment, the time, the space to offer this kind of training? Or does a community college or other agency near you offer that? You could offer the ESL support part of it, and they could offer the training. Again, this is something that you're going to think about and discuss with your partners. Then you want to talk with the CTE and ESL teachers to find out what level of English language learners could participate. The point of this is not to wait until students have quote unquote learned English, but to offer them support with their English so they could possibly enter training earlier. And the CTE teacher needs to talk with the ESL teacher and the other administrators and coordinators, et cetera, to find out what level would be optimum for the student or the lowest level at which people could succeed. Then you want to develop needs assessment related to those jobs training. So you might have 3 different types of job training that you can offer. And then you do the same thing. You just offer your students who want to do training as in a written document, for example, or through counseling, you could do it and find out which training students want to be part of. And then because of that, select job training you want to do, and then the COAPs that relate to that job training. The COAPs, just let me say, are the trigger for payment points. So if you want to get funds or utilize the funds available to you to fund these programs, it's the COAP system that allows your agency to earn payment points through the passage of COAP assessments by your students. Okay, and again, with the workforce training, you want to utilize the results to inform your agency's selection of training programs to offer, and then select the COAPs that best support. You can choose general COAPs, for example, soft skills or getting and keeping a job, or you can choose more specific COAPs that relate specifically to training, early childhood education, information technology, etc. We now have a custodial civic objective, or actually it's in hospitality, but custodial is part of that. And if you have a training program that's not identified here or not part of what's here, we can write new civic objectives that would relate to your training program. So you can always contact elcivics@casas.org to discuss those other needs that you might have. For the workforce training, you should also fill out the needs assessment summary form. Any questions about needs assessment? Okay, once you have found out the needs of your students, either in civic participation or IELCE, now it's time to select the civic objective and additional assessment plans, which are called CAEPs. Okay. So as I mentioned before, agencies use the plan, the CAEP, to develop an assessment to give to learners after 30 hours of instruction. And this instruction needs to be content specifically related to the CAEP. It can be general, but it needs to be related to the CAEP. So if you're doing a health-related CAEP, all the instruction needs to be health-related. As I mentioned before, agencies are required to select 3 to 10 CAEPs. Depending if you're a small agency, you might want to select only 3. If you are a very small agency and you want to select fewer than 3, or if you're a large agency or for some other reason you need to select more than 10, then you need to request permission of your CDE consultant. And please CC elcivics@casas.org so that we can keep track of your permissions. It's something that is readily accepted, so you don't have to worry about it. Just send a brief description of why you need to do fewer than 3 or more than 10. So Kristen says, so we can do workforce training needs assessment and assessment even if we do not receive 243 funding. Yeah. So if you're a WIOA agency, you would have requested 231 or 243 funding. If you don't have 243 funding, you can, of course, still do training. You won't earn payment points for that, but you could earn payment points for just doing the CAEP and receive it at the 231 level. I hope I answered your question. Kristen, if you want to come on the line, feel free if you want to explain that a little bit more. Or we can talk about it after the session. Okay. So yeah, I just want to go here. So there are multiple assessment plans. Each civic objective has a number of CAEPs. Each CAEP is numbered. The first number corresponds to the civic objective. So 1, for example, is a banking civic objective. The second number relates to the different plan. So in number 1, which is about banking, there's 1.4, 1.5, etc. Those are 2 assessment plans for civic objective 1. And each plan includes the assessment tasks that the learners must complete to demonstrate what they have learned. And it also gives you the plan for what instruction to do. Okay. Learners at each level must complete at least 2 tasks. It depends on the CAEP, how many tasks there are. And portfolio assessments have more tasks, just so you know. I just want to say this is a lot of information. If this is the first time you're hearing it, it can be a little overwhelming. So just take in as much as you can. And then again, you're free to listen again or to look at the slides more carefully and have that as your base information. And I'm here to help you, as are your program specialists, if you have any further questions. So again, selecting CAEPs, you want to select the CAEPs that most closely match the needs of your learner and your program. To do that, you want to consider the type, again, whether it's oral, written, role play, etc., as well as the content. What do they have to do? So maybe your students want to learn about childcare or preschool and childcare services, which is number 9, Civic Objective 9, locate and analyze preschool and childcare services. There are 2 CAEPs there. 1, 9.3, includes written tasks, lists the characteristics of good quality childcare, and evaluate a childcare facility. Or 9.4 includes oral and written tasks, compare childcare facilities, and present an oral report on childcare agencies. So depending on the needs of your students and what they want to learn, you might choose 9.3 or 9.4. Or you might choose 9.3 one semester and 9.4 another semester if your students are very interested in childcare. Okay, once your CAEP is selected, this is sort of a preview of what's coming next. You're going to then develop or borrow performance-based assessments based on the CAEP that you've selected. And then you're going to develop or borrow 30 hours of instructional materials that are topic related to ESL instruction. The instruction can be done by teachers individually to meet these objectives, or your school can develop a curriculum related to the CAEP. It's up to you as to how to do that. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about performance-based assessment. This definition from Chun 2010, that performance-based assessment measures students' ability to apply the skills and knowledge learned from a unit or units of study. So they're not just reading about how to talk to a doctor, but they're actually able to talk to a doctor or simulate talking to a doctor at the end of the instruction. And we always want to challenge students to use their higher order thinking skills to create a product or complete a process, like having an interview. So this is all about students being able to do things outside of the classroom. So we talk about writing the assessment first so that you know what to teach, so that the students will be prepared to pass the assessment. Okay, so you want to develop, or you can borrow from an agency nearby, and I will talk more about that, how you might borrow from someone. If you do borrow from another agency, you would need to keep that secure, not use it as instructional materials. But you need to make sure that the assessments you're doing are performance-based. They're not paper and pencil tests like answering 20 questions. That's not what these tests are about. They're performance-based. They can be written if they're writing something like filling out a job application. So the tests must assess how well a learner can interact with or access the community. They need to directly relate to the CAEP that you've selected. And they include tasks that learners must perform in real life, as I mentioned, such as talking with a doctor or completing an insurance claim. And then they need to relate to the instruction in the topic and instruction type. So if you have a task about talking to the doctor and the assessment is going to be talking to the doctor, or the instruction is all about talking to the doctor, then the assessment must be a role play kind of situation where students are actually doing that. So you need to match the type of assessment with the type of instruction. If you're instructing orally, then you must test orally. If you're instructing in writing, then you test in writing. Okay, and just so you know, the following may not be included in performance-based assessments. There cannot be true-false questions. There cannot be multiple choice questions. They're not fill-in questions, except for applications. Of course, you fill in your name, but it's not the same as filling in the space in a sentence, for example. We can't have matching. There's no text box that students pick a word from the box. We don't do any of that. And the reason is because that's not real life. Students have to have in their mind, they have to have internalized the language that will help them complete the objective. Okay, so again, you develop your agency's assessments based on the CAEP selected, and you can use other agencies' excellent assessments as a model, or you can ask them to borrow it. Remember, if you borrow materials, it doesn't mean they're great materials. So always evaluate whether you think the assessment or the instructional materials you're borrowing are good or meet the needs of your students, because they may not. So you can ask the person you're borrowing from if you may adjust it to meet the needs of your students, and always credit the agency that let you borrow either the assessment or the instructional materials. Okay, I think I've said all those things. Just remember again that you must keep the materials secure, the assessment materials. Okay. Okay, so you've selected your CAEPs, you've developed or borrowed your assessments, and now you're going to plan and offer instruction. So again, for CAEP agencies, this is not, these rules are not required for you, but we consider them to be best practices. So remember that civic participation and IELCE instruction prepares beginning low to advanced ESL learners to access the community by participating in real life or simulated communication or interactions. And for our CAEP students, ABE, ASE non-native speakers, native speakers of English, it will do the same, because as you noticed, the tasks, everyone needs to fill out an insurance form or get a driver's license or have an interview. So these materials were originally designed for ESL students, but now they can be used for CAEP students as well. And just so you know, literacy students can participate in instruction and assessment, but agencies will not receive a payment point for any student who scores under 180. So that would mean that they're a literacy student, but it may happen that they pre-test as a literacy student, and then later on in the year, they go above 180. If they took an assessment during that time and that assessment was reported, then that payment point or that passage of the test would count towards a payment point if they later in the year raise their score to above 180. Okay, so civic participation in IELCE instruction includes all 4 language skills. So any kind of instruction, even if you're working on learning how to write a job application, you still need to listen to the words. You need to speak about the form. You need to read about the form and write the form. So all of our instruction includes listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay. And it's not limited to the objectives that are listed in the CAEP. We have limited the language and literacy objectives in the CAEP just to show you what has to be taught in order to pass the CAEP, but you can use another list called the pre-approved civic objectives list that has expanded language and literacy objectives that you can use to make your instruction more robust. Remember, again, for WIOA agencies, you must offer at least 30 hours of instruction. CAEP agencies, that would be up to your discretion, but we would hope that you would follow this 30 hours of instruction rule. And we have a question: is Burlington English EL Civics sections acceptable? Your agency decides what instruction is acceptable. What you need to do is make sure that whatever instruction you're offering has the same content as the assessment that you're going to develop based on the CAEP. And if it does, you can use it. So you can pick and choose from different instructional materials. You can develop your own instructional materials, whatever relates to the CAEP, and will prepare students to pass the CAEP assessment. And this note at the bottom says the 30 hours of instruction can include classroom instruction and text materials that are already being covered. So maybe in your ESL textbook, you have health, and as part of your health unit or your health CAEP, you're going to be using that instruction, and that's totally fine. So you just need to make sure that you add on anything that's not already covered in the materials that you're already using in order for students to be prepared to pass the assessment. Okay, so this is what you do. You develop a 30-hour instructional plan, which will prepare learners to take and pass the additional assessment. Again, you can borrow those instructional materials, and I've offered you a link here to see some materials developed by Torrance Adult School. They have a lot of things there that you might borrow. Or you can rely on your instructors to plan at least 30 hours of instruction. They can use their textbooks and supplementary materials, or we do have some instructional materials at www.otan.us. And now we have a cadre of materials in the EL Civics Exchange, which you can find at elcivics.otan.us. Not everything you might want is there, so look and see what's there and see if you can utilize those materials. And again, if you borrow those materials, just be sure you credit where you got them if you decide to utilize them for your agency. You can credit them in a little footer that says originally written by Torrance Adult School, adapted by whatever your school is. Okay, any questions about instruction? Okay, so now you need to, you've done the instruction, and now you need to administer the additional assessments. They can be administered after 30 hours of specific CAEP related instruction. The 30 hours is not seat time, it's instructional time. So if you've offered the instruction, 30 hours of it, whether or not the students were there, the whole 30 hours, you can still offer the assessment. But we highly suggest that you only offer the assessment to students who you think will pass. In other words, whether or not they were there the whole time, they have all the information they need to pass the assessment. We don't want to test and retest students. So if they weren't there for the whole 30 hours and they're missing some information, important information to pass the assessment, you know what that is because you know you've developed your instruction towards that, then wait until you've given that student more instruction before you give them the assessment. The assessment can be given by an outside assessor, meaning your teacher across the hall, your principal, the staff member, if they are trained, they all have to be trained, or the classroom instructor. For oral assessments, we suggest that you use someone other than the classroom teacher just to give the students the opportunity to have it seem like real life, because our students get very used to our voices and can understand us, but they may not understand the school secretary as she speaks or she or he speaks. So a great idea if you're doing an oral assessment to have someone else other than the classroom teacher do it, but it's not a requirement. And for any written instruction, of course, anyone can be the assessor. And then students can take the assessment again if they don't pass the first time. And if the learner doesn't pass, then we suggest you give them instruction, a further instruction, and then give them the test again. And there's a place in the data that allows you to put down, test, the first time the test was given, they passed or failed. And then if they failed the second time the test was given, they passed. We suggest that everyone shouldn't pass the test the first time, that 80 to 85% of your students should pass. If 100% students pass, the test is probably too easy. And since you are developing the assessment yourself, you should check that data as how many students pass and then adjust your test accordingly. This should be a challenging assessment that students are learning something to help them access the community. Okay. So just some things you might need to know. Students completing additional assessments must be evaluated on an individual basis. So if they're doing a role play, that role play must be with the assessor, not with another student. So they're always developed on an individual basis. Or if they're giving a report, it can't be a group report. They need to develop the report that has all the elements of the report required, because every student must be evaluated on an individual basis. Sorry. I think I said that. Oh yeah, so written and listening and oral report assessments can be administered in a group setting, but each student must complete the whole task on the student's own, and the assessment must be evaluated individually. Okay, so if they're giving an oral report on a certain part of a larger topic, they could be evaluated individually, not as a group. Okay, and another requirement is CASAS testing. Civic participation in IELCE learners, in order to get the payment points that they've worked hard to earn, must take a pre-test and a post-test. They don't have to make a gain, but they have to take the test. That's the requirement. So even if students pass COEP assessments, if they haven't taken a pre and post CASAS test, then they will not earn the payment points. And then staff must complete an entry record or equivalent for the learner and an update record, etc. And then just as an aside, one person from each WIOA Title II agency is required by CTA to take CASAS test implementation training, one person per year, and then share the information with their colleagues. Any questions so far? So that's the basic information for IELCE and civic participation and CAEP best practices. Those of you who also have IELCE, I'm sorry, this is just more information about the CASAS test. This is just payment point requirements. I'll let you read that. Learners must take CASAS pre and post test, and they can earn 1 payment point for completing a level on a CASAS pre or post test. Barbara and Portia, let me know if this still is true. Learners must take additional assessments based on the co-ops and will earn a payment point for each additional assessment passed. They can earn a possibility of 3 from 231 funds and 3 from 243 funds if the 243 funds are related to training. So if you have IELCE and you've done workforce training and you also have 231 funds, and of course you've given the CASAS pre and post test, and your student happened to complete a level, how many points could one student earn for your agency? Can you type in the chat how many points that would be per year? Okay. Okay, so thank you. So I've got 3 here and 3 here and 1 here. So sorry, I can see why you put 7 because you're looking at this and this, but notice, so this is a subheading. So sorry, I confused you. Thank you for guessing or saying, but it's 1 here for the completing a level and then 1 for each of these. This is a subhead of this, so I see why I confused you. So the answer is
4.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are absolutely right. It is 7. 6 here. My addition is not going well. 3 plus 3 plus 1 is 7. You are totally right. And sorry that I thought that I didn't add up it correct. So the answer is 7. 3 from 231 funds. If you have an IELCE program, 3 from 243 funds, and a student could be in both of those programs, and then 1 payment point for completing. Barb, did you have something to say except to correct me? Because I said
yeah, I was going to help you out on that. And providing that each one of them has 30 hours of instruction for each COAP. And then there's an additional 2 if they take the government and history test and if they take the citizenship test.
Right. So if they were also in citizenship preparation, that is true, but we're not talking about that today. But yes, that is absolutely true. So one student could possibly earn how many, Barb, if they did all of that?
9. I had muted myself.
7 for Civics, civic participation or IELCE and IELCE, and 2 for citizenship preparation. Thank you so much for pointing that out. And again, on the CASAS website, there is a training about citizenship preparation. So if your students want to also learn information about citizenship preparation, and they can also earn some payment points there for your agency. Okay, so I want to show you some resources. Make sure I'm here. Yeah, CASAS remote testing resources. So if you want to test your students remotely, there are information. And of course, this was more utilized during the pandemic. Now, many of you are not testing remotely, but we want to show you that you still could do that. And there's a lot of information about it here. On the IELCE Civics webpage, or on the CASAS webpage, actually, there's a whole section of California remote testing. And here are more remote testing resources, again, found on the IELCE Civics page and on the remote testing webpage. And just so you know, for those WIOA 2 agencies that have 243 funding, you are required also, besides all the 6 requirements I talked to you about, this 7th one is only for IELCE agencies, and it is to complete the IELCE report. And you can find the content of that report at this link, and it's due on April 30th of each program year. And Adriana, you have a question? If you do, please feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat. So that's the basic information. These 2 slides are just a review of the IELCE and civic participation requirements and the CAEP best practices, the needs assessment, selecting of COAPs, developing or borrowing additional assessments, offering instruction, administering the additional assessment, doing CASAS testing, and then for IELCE agencies, also completing a report. So let's look at the questions. If the student is not eligible for payment point because their scores are too high for ESL, will they still qualify for COAP payment point? So there's no such thing as too high for ESL. For IELC, for EL Civics, they can score, if they are in an ESL class and they are, if they're in an ESL class, they need to be registered in an ESL class, then they can score anything and earn a payment point if they pass the COAP assessment. I hope that was clear. And I know we used to think that the quote unquote too high for ESL, but it doesn't count in EL Civics. And their question, when students are in class, are they remote testing or on site? In class, they are on site. Remote testing is used when students are off site. Barb or Portia, if you want to, if you understand what the conflicting information is, please feel free to share.
I believe if a student is, let's say, can't get to school, providing that the assessment could be administered remotely, you can go ahead and administer it, but remember it's an applied performance test.
Okay.
Say they have COVID and they can't come to school.
Oh, you're saying if they're normally in class, but they can't come to the test, then could they be tested remotely? Oh, yes, of course. You can use the remote testing when necessary. They don't have to be a remote student. Thank you for clarifying that, Barb. Okay, that's the general information. We still have some time together, and I have more slides for you to give you the other information I wanted to share with you today. Any other questions? And thank you so much, Suzanne, for posting your name and agency in the chat. If you haven't done so already, please do that. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question if you prefer. Okay, let's move ahead. Feel free to ask questions.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So for the students that are in citizenship standalone, do they have to be also registered in ESL to receive the payment points?
So Portia, are you here and would you like to answer that? She may or may not be here. So I'm sorry. So would you say that again?
So if the students are registered in a citizenship class, only citizenship, do they have to be registered in ESL in order to receive payment points?
So not to receive payment points for citizenship prep. So if they're in citizenship prep class, they can receive up to 2 payment points for passing the test, but they would have to be registered in a civic participation or IELCE class to receive the COAP payment points.
Got it. Thank you.
And you can, and if you look on the FAQs, they tell you how to have like dual registration. You can register someone in a 231 and a CIT prep class. You can, so look online in the FAQs on the EL Civics webpage to see how to do that in the FAQs. And I'm giving you the link again. Find the FAQs in the center gray topped box, and it tells you how to do that.
Thank you. And can we get the PowerPoint emailed?
Yes, no, I will post it online for you. It will be at this website. And it will also be, well, yes, it will be at this website that I just gave you. So you'll find that by tomorrow, I'm sure. And then Edith, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Well, we're waiting.
No question. Thank you.
Okay, if you could put your hand down, then that'd be great. Thank you. Anybody else with questions?
I just want to
go ahead, Barb.
Make sure that you have ESL as the instructional program, because there's some places where you can mark under program, you can mark citizenship, but mark it ESL, and then in the sub instructional programs, you can put NTE, you can put citizenship or whatever you want to put, but you want to make sure that the instructional program is ESL.
Right. I'm not sure if I have a slide about this, but yes, in TE, the instructional program for IELCE, civic participation, and citizenship preparation is all ESL. And then you choose the focus area, Cit Prep, IELCE, or civic participation under the ESL. Thank you, Barb.
Yeah, that was focus area was the word I was looking for.
Good. So to clarify, Kristen says, the response to the last question, a citizenship class student who is not co-enrolled in ESL class cannot get payment points for co-ops. That is true. And if you look at the FAQs, and I'm happy to look at that with you after the session, we can go there, okay, and look at that. I'll show you how to do it. Okay, let's move on. So I want to go to the co-op selection process. So now you know all the requirements. So if you are the designated person, then you need to be selecting your co-ops. Every agency needs to select co-ops, at least one co-op before October 31st of the program year. It's coming up in a month and a half, or a little bit less than a month and a half. So we hope you'll do that. If you are not the designated person, but need to be, you need to write to your program specialist and ask to be designated as someone who can select co-ops. So this information is for you. So again, co-ops must be selected on the CASAS EL Civics Civic Participation IELCE website, and I've given you that link. After selection, you need to download them, okay, into TE. And on the CASAS, on the website I've given you, there are instructions that say co-op download instructions. So you need to give that to your data person or do it yourself. That is the only way the data system knows which co-ops your agency has selected.
And
okay,
Lori,
yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
If you're new to your agency, or if someone has, the person that is selected as EL Civics primary has left or retired or whatever, be sure you take care of that before October 31st, because sometimes you can't get a hold of your program specialist or whatever, and it makes for a lot of scrambling for Lori and your program specialist. So if you can, take care of that well before that deadline.
So yes, whenever there's a change in staff, you should notify your program specialist and let them know who is the person that should be designated as the selector. You can have up to 2 different people selecting your co-ops. And also just be sure that this is a school-wide selection process. Each teacher shouldn't be selecting the co-ops. It should be school-wide. And one of the reasons for that is we've had situations where a teacher selected a co-op and taught it, and then they never reported it to their staff. And so it never got downloaded. And so the payment points weren't able to be counted. So please do this as a school-wide system, even if you're only one teacher, make sure everybody knows what is happening, and that you give the information to your data person, or you download it so that all this is happening and that you receive the payment points that you've worked hard for. So just to tell you, there are 3 co-op selection options. Really, the only one that's being used right now is option 1, pre-approved, because we're basically, any new ones we're basically putting into the system. This system, just to give you some history on it, all the co-ops you see online are ones that agencies throughout the state have written. So nothing is coming down to you from the state except the structure of the system itself, the selection system, but not the co-ops. The co-ops were all written by agencies. And in the past, we gave students, and we still give agencies the possibility of revising co-ops, the pre-approved ones that are already there, or writing new ones. You still have that option. But what we're doing now is you're not really selecting there, because we're nowadays putting all the new and revised co-ops into the pre-approved system so that everyone can use them. So just know this is a dynamic system. You can select from option 1, the pre-approved, what's there already. If you don't see anything that you think it meets the needs of your students, you can revise what's there with approval that you could ask for at elcivics@casas.org. Or if nothing appeals or meets the needs of your students, then you can write a new one, again, with the assistance of EL Civics. I'm going to write that down here at casas.org. Whoops, so tiny. So just email that address, and if you want to revise or make a new co-op. Okay, so just to tell you about our system, Again, the civic objective and co-op system, there are 60 civic objectives, 1 through 54 and 70 through 76. Number 41 is deleted, and there's a jump here because we wanted to give some room between 54 and 70 for any new co-ops we wanted to do. Starting at 70, those are all workforce training co-ops. So all 60 of the objectives can be used for 231 funding and for CAEP agencies. But 31 of the 60 have been designated for 243 funding. And those you can find on this 231 and 243 funded civic objectives list. Again, the link is here. Everything is on the link I've been giving you about the co-op page. So you can see which ones are 243 funding. If you want to get 243 funding, you have to use one of these 31. There are multiple co-ops for each objective, and we have 182, and it's growing all the time. That number may not be correct, actually, because I just approved one yesterday, and I'm going to approve one tomorrow. So this number is growing, and that's terrific because it offers more modern things and more modern things that meet the needs of the current students. Some of these were written quite a long time ago, so we're trying to update them. Okay, I think that's that information. I have another question here. Can I get that CASAS question I had in writing? In-person students test CASAS on-site, online virtual students. That is not what we said. You can test anybody virtually if they need to be tested virtually, as far as I know. In other words, an on-site student, because they're sick, can go home and be tested virtually.
If I can clarify my question.
Sure.
So if students are in class, because we have in-person classes, I'm administering the class as on site, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm being told that I need to administer remotely, but my students are here.
Right. So can you talk to your program specialist? Do you know who your program specialist is?
Here at the site?
No, the CASAS program specialist. Let me show you how you can find that information. What school are you?
Redlands?
Redlands, I'll look it up. It's probably Kay, and she is out of country right now, but will be back, I believe, next week.
Okay. And maybe Kay could talk to whoever is the person that is having this question. Okay, because I can't really give it to you in writing, but we'd be happy to talk to them about what their misconception is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Barb is going to get that information to you, who your program specialist is. Thank you, Barb. Okay, I think I did this. So let me go on to the next slide. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, so I just want to tell you, so again, you can revise co-ops. We're not having you enter them into the system anymore, but if you want to revise a co-op, you can select from the many tasks that you can see in the pre-approved. So for example, you like task 1 from 30.1 and task 2 from 30.3. You can put those together. Again, elcivics@casas.org, write a brief description of the proposed revisions and submit to elcivics@casas.org. Be sure that they are challenging. We one time had an agency that took all the easy tasks and put them together. We require that they be challenging to the level of the student, okay? And then it can be put in option 2 if it only applies to your agency, but these days we're trying to make them applicable to all agencies, to give all agencies a wider range of things to choose from. But if you do have an option 2, and you might have one from the past, and you can know that because it doesn't have a decimal point and a number after the decimal point, it's just a straight number like 28 or 36. Those are option 2, and you need to select them every year in the system, otherwise they'll go away. So be sure you do that. If you open up the system and you see 33.2, 36.1, and then 45, without any decimal point, be sure to select that, whether or not you're going to use it, just to keep it in the system. And Maria, you have your hand raised.
I do. I have a question. So if the sorry, might not make sense,
No
but we're
worries.
new to the 243 grant.
Mhm.
And if the student, if we're under instructional program and we put ESL, and on the focus area, it lets you, it's either 231 civics participation or 243. The students that are under 231, if they're doing a co-ops that applies for 231 and 243, would they get the payment point as well? Or I'm just not sure as
It
to
depends on
what.
how you mark the class. If you've marked the class 231, then they'll get the 231 payment point. If you've marked the class as 243, they'll get the 243 payment point if the students have the opportunity for training. So 243 these days only relates to
So whatever class has a pathway would be, so for example, our ESL class that has it's an introduction to computer class, ESL class that has a pathway to our CTE class. That's our 243. That would be the only class, right, that we could put as a 243 as an instruction, as a, sorry, focus area.
correct. Although you could, I mean, it depends on what you decide is part of that pathway. If you had another ESL class that you were teaching soft skills, and soft skills were one of the things that the computer teacher thought was applicable to the training, then another ESL class could also be designated as 243 if it taught that COAP.
The soft skills. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Barb has put the Redlands CDE consultant, Diana Batista, and the program specialist, Jay Wright. And I can show you how to find that or how to find their email address. Basically, everybody at CASAS is their first initial and last name and at casas.org. Jay Wright at casas.org. Okay, I think I did this. So option 3, again, we're not using that too much, but if you are going to write a new civic objective, you would go through the same thing, write a brief description, and once it's approved, it would be put into the system. And again, option 3, co-ops must be selected each year. We just had a new one, number 55, which had to do with social and emotional learning. That was a new topic. So we have had some new ones, but it's not as common. But if you have a completely new area like that, then we'd be happy to help you write a new civic objective and then co-op. So again, you may select between 3 and 10 co-ops. This is sort of a repeat of what we did. If you want to select more than 10 or fewer than 3, you have to talk to your CD consultant. I'm not sure that this list is still there, truthfully. So so that you might have to ask your program specialist for who your CD consultant is if you don't know. And as I said before, only designated persons can make the selection. And you want to email your CASAS program specialist to report any changes. So as we said before, for all the options, October 31st is the deadline for at least one co-op, and then option 1, for all the options really, April 30th is the last day to add, edit, or delete. And I don't think you have to worry about these other deadlines because you're probably not doing those. But if you do want to revise a co-op, you should do it at least a month before April 30th because it takes a little while to make it all happen. So how many of you have already submitted your co-ops for this year? Why don't you raise your hand if you've submitted your co-ops or your agency has submitted them? Okay, great. So those of you who haven't yet, please talk to your staff about submitting them, doing the needs assessment, submitting your co-ops. Remember, October 31st is an important date. But remember that you can always change your co-op. So if you're not sure yet, just go ahead and select one. This deadline is really to see whether you can access the system and whether your designated person has access. And then you have until April 30th to make changes. You can always delete what you added before October 31st and add something new. So it's not so precious what you select now. Just select something so we know that you can access the system. Okay, and just to tell you, we've had a lot of success with EL Civics. 67% of California ESL students who participate in classes, both 231 and 243 funded, have so 61% have participated, and 99% of EL Civic students took the co-op assessments, and more than 90% who took the test passed at least one or more co-op assessment. And that may be after they've taken the test more than once, but they have had success in doing that. Passage of the test denotes that they can access the community in some way. So we've had a lot of success with this. People who participate in EL Civics or use the EL Civics co-ops have a lot of success. So we hope you will work on this with your students. Let me just show you some resources, and then I can take you to the website. So all of these resources and links are here. Again, the California Civic Participation web and IELCE webpage I've been posting at each of the, I've been posting into the chat. There's a lot of webinars. This webinar will be posted on the EL Civics website. The requirements, there's a lot of other ones. If you want to plan and implement a new IET, IELCE program, there's information there. There's models of other people who have done workplace programs. I was talking about the FAQs. The FAQ link will take you to a page that shows you how to designate your classes. And then we have an EL Civics support channel, where this presentation will also be posted, and you can find all the EL Civics network meetings and other presentations that might be useful to you. So we suggest you go there, and I'll take you on a little tour as soon as we get through the slides. We also have EL Civics network meetings. They're held more or less monthly. Our next one is November 1st, I'm pretty sure. You can get on the mailing list by emailing elcivics@casas.org, and then you register at caadultedtraining.org. So those meetings are well attended and lots of people sharing what they do, and it'd be helpful for someone from your agency to do that. Just to point out, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, California EL Civics Instructional Materials Exchange. We're working on putting more and more vetted materials. So if you find materials there, you can use them with confidence that they're excellent. Here's what the exchange looks like. You can search by COAP number, or you can just go to the competency area and see the materials. We're still building the materials, so we don't have as many as we'd like to have, but we're adding them all the time. And you can, again, go to elcivics.oten.us to find this website. You can filter by level or by COAP number or keyword. So you can put employment application, for example, in the keyword, and something will come up. These are the task materials we have now that are listed there, and the different agencies who've submitted them. We're looking for people to submit them all the time. If you're writing new materials, we'd love to see them and perhaps be able to put them into our EL Civics Exchange, but remember that they do need to be accessible, or what we call 508 compliant, so that that students with vision issues or other learning issues can access the materials. We have, well, these are the most used co-ops, and we would really like something in 1.6 or 1, Civic Objective 1 and 52, which is soft skills. So banking or finance and soft skills we're looking for. So if you have materials, we'd love you to submit them. So since you may be new to this, you may not have materials, but maybe someone who's more experienced at your agency might have them. And there's information about how to make your materials accessible. Whether or not you plan to post your materials in the EL Civics Exchange, if you're developing new curriculum materials, you should be making them accessible. And we have an accessibility guide you can find here. OTAN has written it for us, and there's lots of information about how to make your materials accessible. Community colleges are required to do it, and adult schools are encouraged highly to make their materials accessible, both for your teachers and for your students. This happens to be an article. If you want general information about IELTS Civics and what's happened over the last 20 years, this article was published in the CAEP journal. And if you have questions about policy and fiscal issues, you should be talking to your CDE consultant. And if you have questions about instruction, assessment, or data collection, you should talk to your program specialist. And I'm going to show you how to find at least the program specialist address in just a second. And you can always email elcivics@casas.org with any questions, and we can direct you to the appropriate source. Okay, hopefully, now that it's the end of the session, you've learned how to identify the requirements of California WIO Title II AFLA IELTS Civics grant specific to civic participation and ILCE. And for those of you who are CAEP agencies, you've understood the best practices that would help you implement a good program for your CAEP students. So now I would love you to rate yourself again in terms of your characterizing your understanding of civic participation in IELCE or best practices for those of you who are CAEP agencies. Again, you don't have to tell me, but on your piece of paper, write down a number from 1 to 5. And once you've done that, compare it to the first number you wrote down, and hopefully you've had at least a little bit of growth. As we've talked about, this is a lot of information. We realize this. Be great to review the slides. And then if you have any questions, talk to your program specialist or email elcivics@casas.org for any questions. I am going to, and also please share this information with your administrators, teachers, TOPS Pro Enterprise staff, whatever you've learned. Your staff may or may not know this information, so please be sure to share it with them, whatever you think, like downloading COAPs, for example, whatever they need to know, please share it. Any general questions before I go off to show you, give you a tour of the website? Okay, I want to thank you for attending, but I'm going to take you right now to the website. So we have about 10 minutes left. Those of you who want a tour of the website will be doing that for the next 10 minutes. So I'm going to put in the link that I have given you throughout the session, and then I'm going to share it. So going to that link or going to casas.org and then looking at the menu to the left. Oh, shoot. There we go. Hopefully, are you still seeing it? I think so. Let me just check. Let me do it again. So I may have gotten out. There we go. Okay, so this is the IELTS Civics, Civic Participation and IELTS website.
Lori, now we see your email.
Okay.
You had it, and I didn't unmute myself fast enough.
Okay, no worries. I think I have it again, but let's see. I'll try it again. Is it here?
Now it shows you your email.
Okay, let's see if this is it. How about this one?
We're still at your email.
Okay, give it a second.
I've been seeing the website.
Yeah, me too.
Almost
you
the
were at
whole time. Yeah,
yeah.
it's fine.
Me too.
There it
Barb?
is. Now
I see that
it.
training and
Now I
support.
see it.
Sometimes it takes a second.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, great. So here's the website. And you'll notice to the left-hand side, these other things. So California remote testing, those of you who need information about that, you'll see it to the left, the IELTS Civics Exchange. If you need to write an IELCE report, you've got that here. If you want to learn about California Citizenship Prep, you're here. And then this is the link over here on the left that shows you who your program specialist is. But before I go there, IELTS Civics Support Channel, this is where this presentation will be posted on YouTube. And then there's also a support channel for citizenship preparation. Are you seeing my little hand there that's showing you where I'm looking?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to click on this, and this is if you click there, you see your list. Now I'm not sure if this has been updated, Barb, since we had our meeting last week, or if it needs to be updated. But this again, Barb is the program specialist for these consortia, Jay Wright for these, Jody Slider, Kim K. Hartley, I'm EL Civics, Portia, and actually, yes, well, I think this is probably going to go away, but and Steve Thompson. This link used to work. There used to be a link here to the CDE consultant, but now there isn't. So you need, if you want to find your CDE consultant, you go just email adulteducation@cde.ca.gov or call and ask who your CDE consultant is. And they'll be able to tell you.
And I put my email in. If you can't, some people, you may not know what consortia you're in. And if you don't know the consortia you're in, just give me a call and I can figure it out for you.
Okay, great. And thank you, Barb. And
Yeah.
thanks. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go back to the regular page that we were on. There we go. I hope everybody can see it now. And just to tell you, so I showed you the left-hand side, and now down the center are the important things. So these first four items are the most important things. This is the list of COAPs, pre-approved additional assessment plan list. And if you go there, and hopefully again, you'll continue to see it. It may take a minute. This is how you find it. So if you want to look at COAP for 33, Civic Objective 33, you go to the number 33, you make sure that you're in the current year, you hit go. Oh, and there it is. And so then if you scroll down, you'll see all of them, 33.1, 33.2, 33.3. And if you want to see what they are, you hit view details over on the right, and then it will show you the COAP. Here are the language and literacy objectives, the different tasks, etc. So that's how you look for that. Or so when you're trying to see which COAPs your students want, you can look here. If you're the designated person and you're going to select, you go to the second item, select COAPs, and you're going to select pre-approved COAPs. You must be the designated person. Other people can't access this, so make sure you're the designated person before you go there. Basically, you'll see a list similar to the one we just looked at, and it'll say view details, and then it'll say on the right, select, and that's how you select it. I can't, let's see if I can show you that. Maybe I can, sort of, yeah, you have to be logged on. Let's not do that. But if you're the designated person, you can do that. Just to show you, in this gray box are the most important documents. So any COAPs that have been revised, the pre-approved civic objective list, which shows all the language and literacy objectives, the different funding we talked about, if you want to know whether it's 231 or 243 funding, the needs assessment requirements. And this is the FAQs. In this document, and I don't have time right now, but I'll go after our 3:30 time ending. This is where you can find out how to designate different classes. Okay, so this document's really important. And you should probably read through these documents every year on July 1 to make sure you have all the information you need. After that, there's all the webinars and slides. This is where you'll find at the very top. So right now you have EL Civic participation. This is the one for 22-23, and I'm going to replace it with our session from today. So this is where you'll find the slides, and you'll find the YouTube recording if you want to listen again. And there's lots and lots of webinars and slides. Information about IELCE, about implementation for COAPs for CAEP agencies here, digital resources, needs assessment resources, all the things we talked about are all here, and then general resources at the bottom. So you should become familiar with everything that's available to you here on this website. Everything you need is here. So that's what I wanted to show you. Any questions? I don't think I'll give you a second to put something in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, so I'm happy to stay on the line after I end the recording. Oh, here we go. Can classes have only one designation? So that's what we're going to talk about. So Kristen, let me sign off, with the recording, and then you'll find that information. Everybody who's listening to this recording now, you'll find that in the FAQs. One class can have 2 designations, or so 1 3-hour period, half of it could be designated as 231 and half of it could be designated as 243, for example. And you'll find that information on how to do it in the FAQs, and I'm going to take you there in just a minute. I want to thank you for attending today. California IELTS Civics Basics, IELCE, and civic participation, as well as best practices for CAEP. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions, email your program specialist or elcivics@casas.org. And please attend our meetings on the EL Civics Network. You can register for them at caadultedtraining.org. I'm going to sign off the recording.